All right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. 363 days to go to the elections, and we're talking about securing the elections, and that's what we're talking about just now. And let me introduce my guest really quick. Dominic Kisavi is the Commissioner of Police and Staff Office Operations at the National Police Service, and also retired General Bashir Haji is here, security and governance expert with us in studio. We're still waiting for Franklin Mukwanjo, who's the Executive Director for Center for Multiparty Democracy, and Honorable Richard Onyonka, Member of Parliament Kitutu Chache. They'll be speaking about the political sides of things, but my experts in studio are speaking about the security sides of things. And Mr. Kisavi, I'll start with you on this one. 363 days to go. Are the police ready for the elections?
Yes. The National Police Service is ready for the elections.
Yeah.
Actually, we started preparing for the elections a bit early, back in early this year.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why we started preparing early is that we are also feeling that there might be a possibility of a referendum. But for elections, you have started. And last month, the Inspector General called a conference for all county commanders and regional commanders.
Yeah.
And he took them through the National Election Security Plan. We are ready, and currently we have in place a National Police Service Election Security Secretariat.
Yeah.
And that secretariat is charged with the mapping the country. Mapping includes so many things. One of the things that we are doing is we are scanning the country to identify possible hotspots,
Yeah.
which keep on changing depending on the prevailing circumstances. We are also doing an audit of our resources,
Yeah.
including personnel, equipment that we may require. That includes also motor vehicles, anything that we might require,
Yeah.
to make sure that the country is safe during the general elections.
Okay.
So we are ready.
All right. Retired General Bashir, you are actually doing a thesis on election security. What have you found out as the highlights of this thesis, and what needs to be put in place right now? Because you still have 363 days to go.
Thank you, Trevor, for having me once again on this show. Yes, first of all, I would like to say that elections are a very important event in any country, in any country aspiring to be democratic. And Kenya is one of them.
Yeah.
It is an opportunity for us to showcase our belief and trust in democracy. And it is the first step towards creating a viable and united nation and one entity, whether it's federal, whichever system is in place. But as a nation, it's the first step to show how strong we are and how sovereign we are internally. Having said that, there are many challenges. And we have seen this through the whole almost 60 years of independence that we have enjoyed in this country, from 1963 to date. Yeah. And the challenges come in various shapes. Initially, you remember, elections were more or less directed. We didn't have an electoral commission as such. We had someone in the office of the president who would oversee an election, yeah. Especially since we became a single-party state. And so our elections were more or less directed because it was a one-party affair. Fast forward to 1992, things changed. We became multi-party, and a whole new sphere of electoral life opened up.
Yeah.
And people got the space to contest. Then after the 2010 constitution, the space was even expanded further. And we have more MPs, we have MCS, we have a devolved system of government, and therefore there is more participation. All these offers us an opportunity to run our country as efficiently and as best as we can. However, every time we have an electoral cycle, we tend to have some confusion, yeah. Some violence, some disconnect. And of course, Kenyans always wonder, are we not prepared for this? It's quite a challenge. Among the challenges that I'm seeing, to answer your question specifically, yeah. One is the social aspect. What is society's expectations? How prepared is the society itself how mature are we? How cohesive are we in terms of ethnic balance? And then are we, if you look at, if you combine that with the economics and call it socio-economic aspect, then the issue of poverty comes in. The issue of governance comes in. The issue of trust comes in. Trust in institutions, and especially political institutions, government institutions, electoral infrastructure, so on and so forth. So these are the main areas.
Major challenges. And when we talk about institutions, Kisavi, that comes to the police, then they've been accused of using excessive force post-election, especially if there's a dispute. What is the plan now then to ensure that human rights are upheld all the way from now, all the way after the elections as well?
I'd like to tell the country that we have had violence in this country. And one thing people should understand is that the National Police Service is apolitical. We are not aligned to any political party. And when we are executing our mandate as a National Police Service, we are also guided by the law and the Constitution. One of the things you should understand is that circumstances depend from one place to another. I think we have seen what happened, let's say, for example, 2007. And also 2013 was relatively good. The last election, 2017, was there also had some pockets of violence. And this violence was not only witnessed during the dispute or after there arose a dispute of the elections. It was there even during campaigns and all that. And when our officers are executing the mandate, they also reminded of one thing, that according to the National Police Service, there's a provision in the 6th schedule which gives it gives officers the criteria to be used when deciding when to use force in the execution of their duties. One of the things is that when the life of that officer is in danger, or another person is in danger, that officer, and he has used all other means, available means, less violent means to execute his duties and failed, then the law allows him to use force. And also when in self-defense of himself, he might be cornered with the people who are armed with all manner of weapons, and his life is in danger, he can use force. And also when protecting property, he can also be allowed to use force. And also you should understand that it also depends what is happening. You saw what happened in Kisumu. Even some of the people who were clashing with the police, when a police and riot vehicle broke down, they offered to repair the vehicle themselves for free, so that the violence can continue. You don't understand this. You cannot understand some of these things. But what you're doing as a service is that in our planning, we have factored in training of our officers in the field. Actually, the training is likely to start towards the end of this year, all the way up to the elections. And also, if you also remember, it has been said before that in the national police colleges, we have factored in human rights as part of the curriculum. So that officers can be versed with the requirements of the Constitution when it comes to human rights, and also the law, and also the repercussions if they exceed is expected of them when they are executing the mandate. But also, again, when these things happen, we have independent institutions like IPOA who are called upon to, they have a mandate in the law to investigate. And then the criminal justice system will be able to determine whether the officers used excessive force or not. But also another thing what you are doing is in their training, of the officers in the field, we have partnered with other institutions, both government institutions and also in the civil society, to be able to appraise our officers on the importance of upholding human rights when they are conducting their duties. And also, we're also trying to engage the public themselves through forums like the community policing, to make sure that we bring them closer to us, so that we are asking them in those forums to exercise maturity, so that we don't need to clash. After all, this is our country. We need security, and we also need to make sure that everybody is free to cast his vote. So we are training the officers, and we are partnering with the communities where we work. Sometimes it's not easy; it depends on the location. Because you also understand, due to some form of incitement, some people see police as their enemies. They don't understand that we are there to offer security to them, so that they can do their businesses. And also some incitements. We have had a situation whereby some people feel it is right for them to disobey the law. You know, when we are working in a situation whereby most people do not understand the requirements of the law, it becomes a bit difficult. But in countries where people understand what the law requires them to do, they will always respect the police, and they will always support what the police are doing to make sure that they are safe. But this time around, we are upping our game to make sure that we reach each and every officer who will be deployed throughout the country, so that we make sure that we conduct our business peacefully, with respect to human rights, respect to gender, and anything that can be done to make sure that the country is safe. It's interesting that you mentioned gender issues. Does it mean then that there will be special desks where they can report should that happen? In most police stations, I cannot say it's all police stations, we have gender desks. And this is an ongoing program to make sure that every police station in the country has a gender desk. And we even, in some of the police stations, we have even a children desk that deal with matters to do with the children. So this is an ongoing process. All right. Joining us now is Franklin Mukwanje, is Executive Director for Center for MultiParty Democracy. Now you bring in the political sides of things. In your own assessment, are we ready for the elections? 363 days to go.
There is no reason why we can claim not to be ready, because immediately after the 2017 elections were called after the 26th October rerun, we should all have been preparing for the elections. However, I am concerned that we are a country that are likely to always not learn from our lessons and always setting up ourselves for failure. If you look at the political discourse right now in Parliament, and also in other election management bodies, you realize that we're ready to point fingers at police, point fingers at IEBC, point fingers at everyone else other than ourselves and our contribution on whether we're not going to have an accountable, fair, credible process with a legitimate outcome, because we all pulled our weight. And these are issues that we have to look at. Look at the legal reforms that were required. Today, there's a spat between the IEBC and the National Assembly on the reforms, and the election campaign financing is not the only piece of legislation that was required to be undertaken in time to ensure that we improve on the organization and management of elections, since the reports that were, prepared out of evaluating the 2017 elections. Look at the current arrangements in the political parties. We have been discussing the political party primaries, and this is a huge contributor to the disorganization of the elections. Look at the issues of the election dispute resolution mechanisms. Up to right now, there isn't clarity on the role of the IEBC's internal dispute resolution mechanism. The other aspect is we have not capacitated the political parties disputes tribunal. Even the composition of that tribunal is not fully done. We want, again, all these cases to be arbitrated in Nairobi. It's not possible. We need to finance IEBC. It's still complaining that they do not have resources. You know, if you look at the report assessing the 2017 elections and ask yourself, check against the issues that were to be improved, we are time-barred. And we need not to point fingers. We need all to pull our weight to ensure that the hurdles that lead us to a chaotic general elections, you know, are resolved so that we can be able to have an improvement. And it's a fact that has to go on record. In terms of the 2017 elections, it was perhaps one of the most operationally sound electoral process. We have challenges around transmission, you know, and management of results. And that is where our brothers from the security apparatus then start suffering. Because we have claims all over without justification that, you know, this process has gone this way, has gone that, arising because the voting process is entirely good. But when it comes to election transmission and management, then you start having these emotions rising. We have not even started the mandatory voter registration. You know, and these are things that we have to highlight and prepare. We have not fully constituted the IEBC. And these are issues that we have not to point fingers at each other, but to sit together, dialogue, consult, and see how do we fix these weaknesses so that we can improve on the conduct of the and management of the 2022 general elections.
General, when it comes to the issue of security, how do we merge the civilians and the National Police Service, or even the security agents as well, so that there's some level of trust? Because Kisavi was mentioning that they're trying to work with the community now to understand that they are there to protect them. But how do we bridge that gap, the mistrust that is there?
Thank you very much, Trevor. I think there are frameworks that guide the interaction between the police and the public. And these are things that are in place even before elections. It's a day-to-day thing. So depending on where one is located, then the relationship is at various levels. It's not always low and high all over the country at the same time, but it depends on the location and the prevailing circumstances at any given time. I think the police are now experienced. From 2008, I think their modus operandi has changed, and I have seen this myself firsthand. I think they have woken up to the reality of being prepared for any eventuality. And they realize that you don't wait for the final day to put things into their proper perspective. They have got to engage, as you said, well in advance. And as far as I'm concerned, this should have started from 2017 when we had the last election. There should have been lessons learned. And from those lessons learned, they should have drawn programs. They should have drawn training schedules. They should have run pilot exercises. They should have sought public opinion. They should have called in experts from all walks of life. Whether it is IEBC, whether it is international bodies that oversee elections, or election observers and such like people. And from there, then move on and educate the public. I think the police have a very heavy burden when it comes to security. And it's as far as I'm concerned, they're up to the task, but you don't want to leave a chance for any small thing to disrupt the peace.
And Kisavi, you know, now that we're talking about the interaction between police and the people, there's a general feeling that the police are biased depending on the political side one leans. Are the police taking sides in this political discourse?
Okay, maybe before I go to that question, I'd like to add something to what my friend has said. We did not just start this year. Actually, I didn't want to mention this because we have been doing it for a long time. Immediately after the last general elections, the secretariat that we had put in place was not disbanded. and we continued working. And what is coming up now, we have been developing a standard National Police Service election security manual, which is near completion. We expect the document to be ready probably by November this year, so that we can provide a standard guide to all commanders on what is expected of them during elections. So that's something that we started preparing a long time ago. And among the people who are supporting us, we have experts from the civil society and the public, and also the government institutions who are actually advising us on what to do. When it comes to what you have just said, is that I'm saying with a big no, we are not biased at all. As I have said before, police are political. And in executing our mandate, we follow the law and the constitution. And one thing you should understand, we have no reason at all currently to be biased. Because if you read Article 245 of the Constitution, it's very clear. The Inspector General has an independent command of the police service. Yeah. So if the Constitution, the supreme law of the country, provides that for the Inspector General, he has no reason at all to be. We have no reason at all to be biased, and we are not biased, and we are not inclined to work with any political party. We are working with Kenyans, and we are working with everybody, and we will provide security to everybody, irrespective of which party one comes from. And you know what, you should understand one thing is that one of the problems we have with some Kenyans and some politicians is that the law is only fair when it is in their favor. When the law is against them, police are not fair. But I can assure you that we are not taking sides with anybody, and we are going to work independently, free from interference in executing our mandate. Okay. Yes.
Franklin, how do we change that perception? Because you see, what Kisavi is saying is actually very true. We've seen this even on live TV. When you're on the receiving end of the law, the police are biased, but when you're not on the receiving end, then they're fair. How do we fix that?
It's, I agree with the police officer that the police service should act independently, because the Inspector General has that Article 245 to operate from. But this is more of a perception and a cultural issue than anything else. Our elections, including the cost, is an issue of our poor political culture that is rife of mistrust. And the other aspect to the culture is that we generally are not law-abiding citizens. If there is one, we say in governance, that the taproot of good governance is the rule of law. Look at the impunity that has been set at the highest level in terms of disobeying court orders, for instance. Look at what that then has effect on the common person. Yeah. It is exactly what the officer is saying, that when you are on the wrong, then you will find every reason to claim that the actions that are being undertaken, are subjective and not objective. But we must also tell our officers that there are actions that they engage in, perhaps not all and entirely the entire service, but there could be some rogue elements that either exaggerate their action or they go way above what they are supposed to do. Yeah. And that leads to those perceptions from the public that the officers are not acting independently, and there could be a reason for some hands influencing that decision. So we have to stick to the rule of law, and also ask the police officers to be more restrained in terms of their approach, because one of the challenges is when there is excessive force in terms of addressing these issues, then you have the public wanting to retaliate. We have these issues coming out that the actions, for instance, in disbursing demos or dispersing political rallies in a particular region is not using the same force as in other particular regions. So we have also all to act, as I said. Election process is a collective action. Yeah. The security apparatus are a major stakeholder in the electoral process, just like political parties and the media and the voter and the IEBC. Without supporting each other, without proper coordination, we cannot be able to pull off a free, fair, credible, and transparent process. Yeah. We have reasons to be concerned as a people, looking at what has happened with the police services in our neighborhood. What has been the role of the police service, for instance, in Uganda, in the election process? How have the police behaved in Tanzania in the electoral process, in Burundi? And these are things that we cannot say we are too unique, we cannot learn from. And the securitization of the electoral process is a conversation that we cannot escape. Yeah. But what the Kenyans need to understand is that they also, where they have to enjoy rights, those rights come with obligations. And the obligation here is to follow the rule of law. I do not think we will have standoff with the police officers when all of us are saying, this is the way I have to conduct myself, you know, as a voter. This is how I should conduct myself as a candidate. I have to follow this particular route, which I have been allowed. The adherence to the code of conduct is a big mess. Yeah. Basic offenses like voter bribery that goes on in broad daylight, you know, in the eyes of the police, are issues that we are asking that will perhaps be taken, action will be taken, and they will inspire confidence, yeah, you know, in the whole process, and say, look, we are now not strange bedfellows, but we're all working towards the common purpose and common result of a free, fair, transparent, credible process. Yeah.
General, you had spoken about this earlier on when you were speaking about the socio-economic aspect, and you spoke about poverty and trust in institutions. And Mkwanja is now bringing in the issue of voter bribery. You know, there's a very thin line between those two. How then do you manage a situation where the electorate are desperate because of poverty, and then there's the people who come in and they have the handouts? How do you manage that situation?
It's a tough one, actually.
Yeah.
From personal experience, I have been in an election myself. And this is the main point of the societal problem. It's corruption. I mean, let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
There's a lot of corruption in the electoral process. And if there is a way if we can find a way to reduce the amount of corruption that takes place, then we are one step closer to a more secure election.
Yeah.
You find that even the IEBC is not foolproof. You find even in the employment of the electoral staff, they're not very forthright. And there are gaps here and there that allow for politicians to manipulate.
Yeah.
And the problem with the electoral security does not start on election day. It starts way before, in the preparations. And this is why you are in your interviews in the news I was watching last night, there was a lot of pushback on the limits that the IEBC is the capping on electoral expenses.
Yeah.
And someone was asking, how do you account for money you've used to bribe voters or supporters?
Yeah.
Or to mobilize supporters. And there are many ways of spending that kind of money without being noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the thing that we have to discuss openly.
Yeah.
Our youth, we have a serious youth bulge. They're jobless. Yeah. They're volatile. Any slight spark, any small spark will ignite a big fight, a big fire. And so this, for example, you are told one polling station should have 700 voters, but in reality on the ground there are thousands, and pulling and pushing each other, and the slightest disruption there could cause a lot of havoc, even death. So the societal issue really is tough. Add to that the ethnic dimensions, that my so-and-so, my relative, my cousin, my so-and-so, my kinsman, should be the one to be elected.
Yeah.
There are no issue-based discussions, and this really narrowed down the options, even for the police.
Yeah.
Actually, as far as I know, the police are at the farthest end of the security problem.
Yeah.
When you talk of securing an election, it's not seeing the police deployed on the streets or at polling stations. It's much bigger than that.
Yeah.
It starts with preparing and printing of ballots,
Yeah.
and securing those ballots.
Yeah.
The BVR equipment, like in the last election, we've been reading reports that there are a lot of mobile polling stations that were not catered for because they were not secured. So how did they get into the hands of certain individuals?
Yeah.
You are talking of the polling, securing the polling station itself. Is the police presence useful? If it is useful, then how can it be improved? Okay. The transportation of boxes, which has been reduced now because counting is done in the polling station,
Yeah.
but the transmission of the result, is it secure? Okay, and then we should not just look at the internal issues. Now there is the challenge of external actors
Yeah.
interfering with our election and manipulating the results to their advantage,
Yeah.
because they want people they can use or who are useful to them
Yeah.
in positions of power.
Yeah.
You should look at issues like challenges that are brought about by electronic equipment. For example, your mobile phone. People can send you funny messages. They can send you threatening messages. They can send you insulting messages.
Yeah.
You see, so it's much broader than seeing the police fighting on the streets with youth throwing stones and rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a complicated subject, actually.
Okay. Kisavi, what is the biggest challenge when it comes to dealing with corruption?
One of the biggest challenges that we have when we are dealing with corruption is our culture
Yeah.
as a nation. You'll agree with me that from the olden times, giving was not an issue.
Yeah.
Appreciating was not an issue. But now it has been criminalized by the law. Somebody cannot just walk and give me something as a police officer because I'm serving that person. But one of the challenges that we have as a service is away from elections, is that if you look at the Anti-Corruption Offences Act, the law recognizes the EACC officers as the only persons who can enforce that act. Previously, the Act number Cap 65 gave the police the mandate to enforce the laws on corruption. But now we are out of it.
Yeah.
It is the anti-corruption who are doing it, the EACC who are doing it. And one of the challenges is that there are so many people who are willing to bribe, and they don't feel it. They don't see it as bad. And the temptation is there from the receiving part of it. So it's a challenge to us, because one thing we need is that if we can all agree that we are not going to bribe, and we are ready to go through the due process of the law, if somebody has committed a crime, then this country will be much better. And let me tell you that if corruption can actually be reduced by even that %, this country will change a lot. So we have a challenge of so many people willing to bribe. And there is a lot of temptation, because it might be of hard economic times. So many other people are willing to receive the money. But I wish we can join hands together and fight the fights. Then this country, our work will even be easier on our part, because like what you have said on voter bribery, the leaders we are electing are the ones who enacted the laws in parliament. But they are the first people to break the law by bribing the voters. That means their integrity comes into question. Why should they be at the forefront of bribing, and yet they are the ones who are legislating in Parliament to criminalize some of these activities.
Yeah.
So we really have a challenge because of the people who are willing to bribe.
Yeah. And Mkwanja, you know, this is an actual situation because the voters themselves expect to be bribed. In fact, if you go to the ground and you don't give anything, you're most likely not even going to be voted for because they expect you to do it. Some of them outrightly ask you, it is corruption, but will you arrest everyone? How do you deal with this?
We have a deficit in terms of political education.
Yeah.
And I think voter education and civic education is good, but it's not sufficient. And the civic competence can be improved through political education so that we can be able to socialize and induct our younger generations into more issue-based politics as they grow up. Unfortunately, we want to keep away our children from politics because we have branded it something bad. If we improved on the political education and we asked our young people to learn about the politics of things, how politics impacts life, then they will be able to appreciate it as a much better enterprise, and they need to put in their best character. They need to approach it with high moral integrity and virtues to be able to, change this poor political culture.
Yeah.
The other aspect is we need to really focus on the actual functions of an elected leader, which are representation, legislation, and oversight.
Yeah.
But as the police officer again explained, culturally, we are a social welfare dispensation kind of society, that we are used to looking at leaders, including you, Trevor, when you appear in your village. And I appear in my village. The community appreciates my position and responsibility. They have expectations,
Yeah.
And therefore, anytime you have someone having a new baby, they will call their member of county assembly. My wife is expectant. Please, I'm expecting a huge bill. So we have shifted the focus of the elected leaders from their core functions to being social welfare dispensers. I mean, if you look at the entire salary of an MCA over a period of 5 years, why would you want even to set that minimum of the maximum of about 5 million shillings for the campaign?
Yeah.
What is the motivation? If you look at the conversation that is ongoing on the election campaign financing, it has nothing to do with we need this law. It has everything to do with how do we stop this from taking off since 2013. And if you want to learn that, look at the nature of the amendments. The politicians, the members of parliament are clear that one of the things that should not happen is disclosure of who supported, contributed to your campaigns.
Yeah.
Why don't you want us to know who is financing your campaign? They also do not want, and possibly there is a good reason in it, that this is private money.
Yeah.
Why would I give it to a team to manage for me? Perhaps we can have a discussion about that. But you need to disclose at least the source of the money, other than putting a capping on it. And why we have this challenge is because one of the areas that we have an illicit flow of money is during the campaign period.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that if we deal with it, we don't deal with it, that is the time that corruption is initiated. They want to provide a cover to those financiers because after elections, they are likely to engage in dubious dealings with the same people that financed them.
Yeah.
They have the CDF, they have the World Development Fund, they have the National Gender Action, Fund, and all these are opportunities for corruption. Yeah. And unless we begin at the bottom and inculcate particular values in the new generations, we cannot be able to address this issue. We must be able to cushion a generation have sort of a sponge that can be able to absorb these bad manners that the generation of the ones in this, studio have to absorb and not allow it to leak to the others. And this will happen through political education. We have also to look at the process. Because when you come back the process quite much, like you want to say the party primaries will happen within this period, all right? That is room for malpractice. We must look at the processes and clearly provide for mechanisms within which it limits the malpractices. Otherwise, the more we work on weak processes, the more opportunities we provide for the participants in those processes to try to beat the system so that they can get a competitive advantage over their competitors.
All right. I have to take a quick break here on Daybreak. When you come back, we'll take a bit of your feedback. I see a lot of it, and I see some of you asking about the crime rates in the city. We'll ask the Commissioner of Police here whether it's increasing and what they're doing about it in just a bit. Keep your views coming at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. We're talking about securing the election. 363 days to go. Are we ready? That is the conversation we're having. See you in a bit.